The question now, do we really want to back Russia into a corner that gets us all killed? Here to discuss, former CIA officer and Portman Square Group chairman and CEO for all of your security and accessorial needs. Mike Baker is back. Great to have you, sir.
Thank you very much, Kennedy.
So how gray is the area we've entered into now? Can the U.S. still claim plausible deniability in terms of directly helping Ukraine in their war?
No, and they haven't been able to for some time. So I think what the administration needs to do, I think, and I'm sure they always listen and say, what does Mike think we should do, is they need to be clear and concise in what our end game is here, what our objective is. We don't need many more case studies outside of Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, to know that when you are on a war footing, you need to know what your objective is. Right? Afghanistan, what was objective? Keep the terrorists from using it as a training ground and preparation ground. Try to develop some semi-democratic central government. You could argue that didn't work out that well. Yeah. But here with Ukraine, the problem is we haven't really enunciated what our end game is.
Are we looking
to?
When do we do that?
We never really do.
Afghanistan or even Vietnam. They haven't been able to say it since the Civil War.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is that's what we, in an ideal world, that's what we should do. But you have to look at this and say, is our objective to continue to supply? Look, yesterday, a new weapons package, $700 million, right, in some very serious hardware, right? The drone systems that you mentioned are a major step up from what the Ukrainians have been having access to and using, primarily from Turkey. The additional rocket systems, artillery systems that we're talking about. The Danish, for crying out loud, and the Swedes are agreeing to provide Harpoon anti-ship missiles. All of these things are necessary if the Ukrainians are going to stay in the fight, but we then have to clearly state as an administration, as a government, what that end game is. Do we intend to, is the game to keep supplying so that they win and eventually reclaim all the territory that once was the Ukraine prior to 2008 and the annexation of Crimea and then the move into the eastern Ukraine in 2014 and beyond? Yeah, well, is it that, or is it, we're going to just weaken Putin enough to eventually he comes to the table and eventually he ends up with the land that he had pre-invasion anyway? Where is this going?
That's what the president is kind of saying, that we want to give Ukraine every fighting chance to improve their standing so it brings Russia to the table. But that assumes that there is some diplomatic channel open. We know there is not. So right now they're sending enough money to keep the war going for many years, which is not, it's a horrible objective for Ukraine. It's an awful objective for us when you've got parents here who don't have baby formula and they can't afford to drive the minivan to the store to look for some. So it's going to be.
And that's where they need to be. I'm sorry, that was rude of me, but that's where they need to be clear, because otherwise then the public, right, and eventually our NATO allies, they're going to start saying why. Where is this money going and why is it important? We have to be more clear than just Nancy Pelosi quoting the Bible and saying, when you fed me. We have to tell people. People are smart enough to take that on board and make a decision as to whether that's more important than spending that money here on infrastructure and baby formula.
Are you surprised that you do have a counter cyber warfare general in the Pentagon talking about the offensive, the cyber offensive that the U.S. is partaking in?
Yes. Look, the director's a very experienced individual, but I don't understand the drive that we've had over the recent past, a few years, to just open our yaps about things that really don't need to be said. So the NSA director said, it basically comes out and it says openly during a conference that we are engaged in offensive cyber attacks against Russia. Well, look, you could argue that's a statement of the obvious, but why would you state it? And he also then talked about how we're working with our liaison partners overseas, using our cyber command personnel and expertise with our liaison partners to identify hacker groups and their tools that they're developing and using. Again, yeah, you could argue that we hope that's what we're doing, but why talk about it? I guess that's the part that puzzles me. Just keep the pie hole shut and do what we're doing anyway.
No one wants to shut their pie hole. Everyone wants their moment of glory.
No.
Everyone wants to look busy. You are the busiest of all.
Right.
Portman Square Group CEO. It is Mike Baker. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kennedy. See you next week.